On October 11, 2025, a twin-engine Bell 222 helicopter, registration November 222, Echo X-ray, performing at the Cars Copters event in Huntington Beach, California, suddenly lost tail rotor control, spun violently, and crashed near spectators. 5 people were injured, 2 on board, 3 on the ground, but thankfully, no one lost their life. What makes this case so striking is that multiple videos captured what appears to be the mechanical failure as it happened. Today, we'll break down what those clips show, how the tail rotor actually works, and why this accident is raising serious safety and regulatory questions. The Cars Copters on the Coast event is a massive annual gathering along the Huntington Beach waterfront, right by the Pacific Coast Highway. Picture thousands of people, around 25,000 spectators, surrounded by supercars, display helicopters, and food stands. It's a community event meant to celebrate the intersection of cars and aviation. The Bell November 222 Echo X-ray was one of roughly 10 helicopters scheduled to appear. Footage shows it making low-altitude passes over the hotel area with its landing gear retracted, suggesting a demonstration pass, not a landing. Around 2 p.m., near a line of palm trees by Pacific Coast Highway, the helicopter begins yawing sharply, loses stability, and descends rapidly before impact. That location raises eyebrows because FAA rules normally require aircraft to remain at least 500 feet from crowds or structures unless a special waiver is granted. We don't yet know if such a waiver existed, but the proximity here was uncomfortably close. It's one of the first things investigators will look into, whether this flight was authorized to operate that low, that near to people. Seconds later, the mechanical failure begins, and the chain of events moves shockingly fast. To understand what happened, let's cover one key function: the tail rotor. A helicopter's main rotor doesn't just lift, it also creates torque that tries to spin the entire fuselage the opposite way. The tail rotor's job is to counteract that torque. It's controlled by anti-torque pedals, which move small mechanical rods called pitch change links, or PCL, that set each tail rotor blade's angle. In the case of November 222 Echo X-ray, video evidence shows one pitch change link apparently disconnecting mid-flight, likely from a loose bolt, nut, or missing cotter pin. When that happens, one blade loses its aerodynamic bite while the other keeps pushing air, throwing the rotor system violently out of balance. Within seconds, vibration builds, both blades separate from the hub, and the tail rotor gearbox rips free from the tail boom, the kind of catastrophic breakup pilots call a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. Once that tail system is gone, the helicopter instantly loses directional control. It's important to remember that the Bell 222 is a proven airframe, but it's also one that's had past service bulletins and airworthiness directives focused on tail rotor rigging and pitch link security. That doesn't implicate this specific helicopter, but it shows how critical those small components are. A part barely larger than your hand can decide the fate of the entire aircraft. And with that failure, the helicopter entered its next and final phase: complete loss of anti-torque control. Once the tail rotor failed, the helicopter entered the most unforgiving scenario in rotorcraft flight: a total loss of anti-torque control. Without that counterforce, the fuselage starts spinning opposite the main rotor's rotation. The FAA Helicopter Flying Handbook teaches that in such an emergency, a pilot must immediately roll off power, reduce throttle on the collective to lessen torque, and regain some control. But theory rarely matches reality. In this case, video and audio suggest the engines stayed at high power during the spin. You can still see the exhaust plumes and hear the engines roaring as the helicopter descends. That tells us the pilot likely had no meaningful time to react. The entire failure unfolded in seconds. Combine that with low altitude, spectators below, and the shock of a sudden mechanical break, and it's clear this was an almost impossible situation to manage. These are the moments where human factors matter most. Even the most experienced pilots can be caught off guard by what's called the startle effect. that brief freeze when the brain tries to catch up with the chaos. The helicopter was already yawing, spinning, and dropping before any corrective action could take hold. So the real analytical question isn't why the pilot didn't roll off power. It's whether there was even enough altitude or time for that to make a difference. Could a simulator ever prepare someone for this exact, violent scenario? Probably not. And that makes this accident especially haunting. Beyond the mechanical failure, there's another uncomfortable layer: the setting. This wasn't a remote airstrip. It was a public event, surrounded by hotels, cars, and thousands of people. Under 14 CFR 91.119, helicopters over congested areas must maintain safe distances unless they have FAA-approved waivers under 91.905. Those waivers allow low-level operations for airshows and demos, but only with strict crowd separation and safety plans in place. Footage shows November 222 Echo X-ray flying very close to the hotel and spectators, performing multiple passes with gear retracted, behavior consistent with a demonstration rather than a landing. Whether a waiver existed for these flybys is still unknown, and that's something the NTSB and FAA will definitely review. The real concern is risk planning. Even when mechanical failures are rare, events like this need to account for the possibility of one. In this case, the tail transmission was flung off midair, debris that could have easily struck anyone nearby. The fact that only 3 bystanders were injured is remarkable, and probably thanks to sheer luck and quick emergency response. It's not about blame, it's about distance and preparation. These events should always maintain buffers big enough that even a worst-case failure stays clear of the crowd. This one came far too close for comfort. The Bell 222 is an older yet respected helicopter model, but like every aircraft, it has a maintenance history full of technical reminders. Over the years, service bulletins such as ASB 222-07-104 and airworthiness directives have emphasized pitch link inspection, rigging checks, and proper cotter pin installation, small details that make or break reliability. These aren't connected directly to this crash, but they show that tail-rotor hardware has always been a critical watch item for this type. Looking at early imagery, it's possible that palm trees softened the impact, absorbing some of the energy before the helicopter hit the ground, one of the few reasons this accident wasn't far worse. But debris, including the separated gearbox, created an unpredictable hazard zone, proof that once structural breakup begins, control over where wreckage lands is gone. So what should investigators focus on next? The maintenance records. When was that tail rotor linkage last inspected or torqued? The operational authorization. Was this flight covered under an FAA waiver or standard rules? And the timeline. How many seconds passed between the link's disconnection and impact? All of those details will define the official findings once the NTSB report arrives. For now, this is still early analysis. We don't know the root cause, only what's visible and mechanically plausible. The goal isn't to speculate, it's to ask the right questions, so when the data comes, it fits into context. So, here's what we can say so far. A critical tail rotor pitch link failure appears to have triggered a catastrophic loss of control. The pilot's reaction window was painfully short, and the event's proximity to the public amplified every risk imaginable. We're incredibly thankful that everyone survived, and we wish the injured a fast recovery. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding how a single part, a few millimeters of metal, can bring down an entire machine and endanger a crowd. Again, this is early analysis. The NTSB's final report may reveal a completely different sequence of contributing factors, and when it does, we'll revisit it in full detail here. If you found this breakdown informative, hit subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and stay tuned. We'll follow this story until the facts are official. Until next time, fly safe, stay curious, and respect the machines that make flight possible.